Today, as members of Congress pay their final respects to one of their own, Elijah Cummings of Maryland. And Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg recovering today after quite a grilling on Capitol Hill. Why no one seems to be happy with that company today. All that after these headlines.
Another day on strike for public school teachers in Chicago.
I want to see Lori Lightfoot to basically just change her priorities. Why do we have this money that's been allocated for Lincoln Park when we know good and well that we as CPS teachers need that music and need that money invested into our schools?
Jail time for another parent caught up in the Varsity Blues college admissions scandal. Jane Buckingham, best-selling author of A Modern Girl's Guide to Motherhood, marketing guru and television personality, sentenced to 3 weeks behind bars, a year of probation, and a $40,000 fine. Buckingham coached kids on how to find jobs after college, but according to court documents, she allegedly agreed to pay $50,000 to have an ACT proctor take her son's exam. Prosecutors were asking for 6 months behind bars, telling the judge what separates her from some of the other parents was she took control when the wheels nearly came off of the scheme, noting that she even got a handwriting sample from her son so that the test taker could mimic his handwriting when taking the test.
Close call in Phoenix, Arizona. A red light runner narrowly missing that couple pushing their 1-year-old baby in a stroller. Another car entered the intersection at just the right time, crashing into the SUV and preventing the family from getting hit there. The driver now faces multiple charges, including driving under the influence.
A possible sign this morning that the 5-week-old strike at General Motors may finally be nearing the end. Workers at the company's truck plant in Flint, Michigan have now voted to approve a new contract. Their approval is considered a strong sign that workers across the country will soon ratify the contract.
And we begin in California this afternoon, where an explosive wildfire erupted in wine country overnight, and more than 10,000 acres on fire in that area, making it the largest of 9 wildfires burning today across California. Our Will Reeve is up in that area right now. Will, it's good to see you on scene there. Give us the latest at this hour.
Hey, Devin, yeah, we had to come down the hill here in wine country, Sonoma County, just to get a signal. This is a pretty remote area, not heavily populated, although we are in someone's driveway. They've long since evacuated, along with many other residents in the area facing mandatory evacuation orders. So right now, all who are here are fire personnel and us just watching what's happening. And what's happening up behind me, those are not clouds. That is smoke coming down from this fire that began at 9:27 p.m. local time Wednesday night and burned through the night, hitting a peak wind gust of 76 miles per hour. And that's the key. These high winds mixed with low humidity and high temperatures is a really potent recipe for fire. And that's what we've had. It has been burning with unpredictable winds. Right now, we're really lucky that the wind has seemed to die down as the day goes on. It's been a very long night, lots of long hours for the official personnel up in the hills and everywhere. There are vehicles going by, fire trucks and police officers, and a helicopter flying overhead surveying the scene. And the scene right now, we're not entirely sure because the fire is not contained. It continues to grow, 10,000 acres, as you mentioned, and still growing as these perfect, unfortunately perfect temperatures and recipes for fire will continue as this critical danger and the warning for it continues for the next couple days up here in Northern California.
Yeah, well, we're seeing the incredible images there, too, of the wind blowing those embers in the dark of night up there in California. Pretty incredible to see. What can you tell us about the power outages that are also hitting this same area in Northern California? Those expected to continue?
The state's largest utility company, PG&E, was blamed last year for that tragic and devastating Camp Fire in Paradise, California, northeast of here, which was the most deadly and costly in California history that's on record. And as such, they've tried to take protective and proactive measures to avoid having their transmission lines spark during these high wind events that cause fires that can devastate entire regions in a flash. So they shut down the the power to hundreds of thousands of people yesterday in rolling blackouts, depending on when the wind advisory and the heat advisory matched up into the perfect timing for them to shut down the power to keep things safe. The power around here has been out since yesterday. There's not much happening here. All the people who live here are gone. It's mostly just official personnel, authorities taking stock of what's going on with the fire. And these power outages will continue until well after the threat of any possible fires is gone. So once the wind advisory is lifted and once everyone gets a bit of a better handle on what the situation is in terms of the temperature, the winds, the humidity, and everything that's happening here with these fires in northern and southern California, only then will PG&E turn back on the power. But until then, people in the affected regions will be experiencing blackouts that are for their own safety.
And we can hear those roosters behind you there, Will. They're not happy about the smoke and the fires either. Will read for us up there in wine country. Thanks a lot, Will. We'll check back with you. The bone-dry conditions and those and high winds that Will was talking about there will continue into the weekend. We're also expecting more snow in Colorado, a major rainmaker in the Deep South, and our meteorologist, Rob Marciano, has the forecast. Hey, Rob.
Hey, Devin, good to see you. We are focused on what's happening in California, of course. This is the first day of a multi-day wind event, which has already sparked that Kincaid fire exploding overnight. The winds are still pretty bad across parts of Northern California. There you see what the flames look like overnight. Over 10,000 acres, just incredible, flowing downslope. Some of those winds as they are forced up and over the Sierras and down through some of the valleys, not just Northern California, but Southern California as well. Heat advisories and high wind warnings from Santa Barbara all the way down to San Diego. That is not a good combination because we got low levels of humidity as well. So gusty Santa Ana winds later today and tonight could gust over 60 miles an hour easily. This will rival what we dealt with 2 weeks ago with the Saddle Ridge fire. So any spark today, tonight, really through tomorrow will be explosive, and we've got real bad fire conditions right in through Saturday. This is caused in part by the snowstorm that's east of the Rockies now, but Genesee, Colorado, southwest of Denver, they saw, my goodness, I mean, nearly a foot of snow there, and I-70 shut down in Evergreen there for a time. Denver just getting a dusting, but you can see how winter is upon us. This low is driving southeast. Dallas, Houston tomorrow could see some heavy rainfall getting into Lake Charles as this thing rolls itself up the Mississippi River. Could see some significant rainfall here, maybe some minor flooding, but Louisiana and through parts of Mississippi, that's a lot of rain, actually. They could use it, but maybe not all that much at that time. Hey, let's look ahead to the holiday week, Halloween week. Next week, long-term averages show cooler than average temperatures across parts of the Midwest and actually much of the central part of the country. So have a warm costume if you could. Or just eat a pumpkin, like this moose in Anchorage, Alaska, who says, you know what, you're going to put these gourds out here. That's a free lunch for me. And he's going to town there. I prefer more of a pumpkin pie, Devin, maybe a pumpkin spice latte. But if you're a moose, I mean, you take what you can get. So what's happening from the weather department, buddy? Back over to you.
All right, Rob Marciano, our pumpkin aficionado. Thanks to Rob for that. Here in Washington today, Congress is paying their final respects to one of their own. Congressman Elijah Cummings of Maryland, 68 years old, died last week. Today, his body is lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda. We have a live picture of that at this hour as members of the public gather to pay their respects. Cummings was the son of a sharecropper, civil rights champion, rising to become the chairman of the powerful House Oversight Committee, which was leading investigations into President Trump and the administration. The memorial today putting the impeachment inquiry largely on hold and all other official business there on Capitol Hill. It was a raucous day yesterday, though, in that probe. And for more on what happened up there on Capitol Hill, I'm joined here by Ben Siegel, our Capitol Hill reporter. Karen Travers, our White House correspondent, joins us from the White House as well. And Ben, I want to start with you because we're now a month into the impeachment inquiry, and Republicans seem to be really struggling to defend the president and his behavior, and we saw that yesterday.
That's right. For weeks, Republicans have been upset about the process of this, so they physically staged a sit-in of sorts. They stormed into the secure a room in the basement of the Capitol where these impeachment interviews have been taking place. They came in with cell phones, and some of them were shouting and screaming right as Laura Cooper, who's a top Pentagon official, was preparing to testify to lawmakers. They delayed this for over 5 hours. She eventually did speak to lawmakers, but the room actually had to be secured by Capitol Police because many of these members brought their cell phones in, which
You're not allowed.
It's a violation of the rules.
And we see some of them here in these pictures holding their cell phones. This was a major protest to try to make a mockery of this procedure, which they say has been very unfair, this process. Karen Travers, the president was demanding, Karen, that the Republicans get more aggressive in pushing back on this. Looks like he got what he wanted, and it sounds like he's pretty happy with it.
Yeah, earlier this week, Devin, the president said Republicans needed to get tough and do more to defend him. Now, as Ben noted, they weren't really defending him yesterday on the substance of these allegations about holding up the money to Ukraine, but certainly the president loves a good photo op, and that's what he got yesterday. Stephanie Grisham, the White House press secretary, was on Fox News this morning, and she said that she was glad they did it and called it a bold stand. President Devin thanking House Republicans on Twitter for what he said was being tough, smart, and understanding in detail what he once again is calling a witch hunt.
He says it's a witch hunt, Ben, and in large part, he's also complaining that this is a secretive process so far, a month of depositions and investigations by these House Democratic-led committees. What are you hearing about when this will go public? Will the public actually get to see open impeachment hearings?
Yes, Democrats have started this process in private. They say it's an inquiry, a prelude to a public airing of this impeachment process in the House before any vote to send this to a public Senate trial. But I think the bottom line is that Republicans have been participating in this process. They've been behind closed doors with Democrats. They've had equal time to question some of these witnesses, and they've been frustrated because there has been no formal vote on the House floor. They don't get to call their own witnesses. Some of this documentation has not been released, some of these transcripts of these interviews. But there aren't any real rules that govern this process, and it's, the House majority, which is Democrats in this case, have wide leeway to set these rules. Some of these rules, which they point out, Republicans had in place when they were in the majority of the House.
But eventually, we do expect there to be open hearings with cameras and a big public spectacle as they investigate the president on these impeachment charges. Karen, you've also been talking to ABC radio affiliates across the country today and all week, really, about how they're viewing this process so far. What's your big takeaway?
I think the takeaway is that people are confused as to where things stand right now and are waiting to see when this gets to a public phase. Right now, this is all happening behind closed doors, and this is really quite confusing. Every day or so, another official is coming forward, giving a deposition. You get a readout later in the night, or there's selective leaks about what that person said. Devin, it's a lot to keep track of. It's hard for us to keep track of it without a chart saying who said what on a given day. Imagine how just the average person out there who's not following it as in depth as everybody here in Washington is. So I think you get a sense of, tell us when we hit the next chapter, when things start being aired out in public. I also think that any day that the focus is on the process of this, which Republicans are certainly making their big argument, how the Democrats are doing this, how they're doing it all behind closed doors. Any day that the topic and the headline is on process, that's a day the White House is winning, because it's not about the substance and it's not about the allegations about what the president is apparently that the Democrats are focusing on here.
So much to wrap our minds around. We know Karen Travers at the White House. You're on top of it all week. Thank you so much. Ben Siegel, thanks for being here as well, our Capitol Hill guru. Taking a live look now, speaking of Capitol Hill, back at the ceremonies that are getting underway right now at this hour. Members of the public, members of Congress now filing in to pay their respects there in Statuary Hall and the Capitol Rotunda to the late Congressman of Maryland, Elijah Cummings, 68 years old, as we said, a civil rights icon, a champion of government oversight in the United States Congress, today lying in state there after passing away last week from an undisclosed illness. And we see there the House Sergeant at Arms preparing to welcome in some dignitaries. Much more of the Cummings ceremonies today. Also, there's a funeral tomorrow, which President Obama and President Clinton will both speak at. We'll carry that for you here on ABC News Live. Overseas now, though, to Syria and the crisis in that region after President Trump yesterday declared a big success there following pulling out U.S. troops and helping to broker a ceasefire between Turkey and the Kurds. Here's a little bit of what he had to say about the situation.
Turkey, Syria, and all forms of the Kurds have been fighting for centuries. We have done them a great service, and we've done a great job for all of them. And now we're getting out. Long time. We were supposed to be there for 30 days. That was almost 10 years ago. So we're there for 30 days, and now we're leaving. It was supposed to be a very quick hit, and let's get out. And it was a quick hit, except they stayed for almost 10 years. Let someone else fight over this long, blood-stained sand.
So how's all this playing in the region? Let's bring in now James Longman, our foreign correspondent. He's been traveling in Iraq. James, thanks so much for making the effort to be here. I know you're on the move today doing some reporting. So wanted to check in with you after we heard the president's remarks. Give us a fact check here. Is his characterization of this very rosy situation an accurate one?
I'm not sure about that. I think fundamentally the Kurdish people feel as though they've been betrayed. They're trying to put a brave face on it. We've seen tweets from General Mazloum, who runs the Kurdish forces, the SDF, saying thank you, President Trump. But ultimately, they've got to keep the Americans on side, even though they're not going to be in that part of northern Syria where they desperately still need them. You heard President Trump there framing this as some kind of peace deal that has ended centuries of enmity between the Kurds and the Turks, when actually this was a deal that ended a war that he really started, if you like, by announcing the withdrawal of US troops. And more than that, both the US-Turkey deal and the Turkey-Russia deal, which built on that original agreement that Mike Pence struck in Turkey last week, essentially legitimized the Turkish incursion into northern Syria. That is how it's read by Kurds. So under the new Russia-Turkey deal, the Turks will be able to keep hold of that 20-mile stretch that they took originally in their invasion. And then on top of that, Kurds are being told to move from even more territory in northern Syria. They see this as a betrayal. You know, Donald Trump, he talked about blood-stained sand. Well, you know, a lot of that blood is Kurdish. 11,000 of them died fighting against ISIS alongside the United States. Many more were injured, life-changing, debilitating injuries. You know, we were all shocked and appalled over many years watching ISIS publicly behead Western hostages in those orange jumpsuits, you'll remember. Well, those are images that Kurdish people were seeing basically every week. Some pretty outrageous crimes committed against them by ISIS, the enslavement of their women, for example. So look, this has been a long period of you know, an alliance between the United States and the Kurds, which has so abruptly come to an end. And I think that's the reason why people are so upset. It's not necessarily that Kurdish people thought that the United States was going to remain here forever. You know, the idea that America is going to police the world, I don't think Americans like that idea, and I think Kurds understand that that's not a political reality either. But it's the speed with which this decision was taken, which I think shocked people and basically kind of knocked the air out of them. Devin?
Shocking and emotional. The representative of the Kurdish regional government was here in Washington last night, Bayan Abdul Rahman. I met with her. She was very troubled by the situation going on where you are, James, and specifically mentioned conditions now potentially being ripe for the resurgence of ISIS. What sort of sense do you get on the ground there now that this could actually be happening?
Yeah, so I think that this is a really, really important point. You know, when we talk about Turkey and its army fighting Syria, we're actually talking about two Turkish forces. We're talking about the official kind of Kurdish military, and we're talking about the kind of militias that it uses to fight on its behalf. Many of them are extremist, and many of them, just to put it bluntly, are basically ISIS. They may not call themselves that, but they are. And it's these sort of jihadist extremist militias that are on the loose now in northern Syria that Turkey can't or won't kind of control, and that is a real danger. They could link up with ISIS fighters and others who have managed to escape from prisons. We understand there hasn't been a huge breakout, but nonetheless, the security situation does remain pretty serious. We've seen ISIS propaganda channels celebrating the Kurdish withdrawals, taunting the Kurds for the Americans having betrayed them. So I think the conditions are ripe, not just for ISIS as we understand it, but for these other extremist groups that Turkey is employing in northern Syria. The hope is that Russia, its role now very crucial in northern Syria, could try to restrain the Turks, but this has perhaps unleashed something on this this part of northern Syria, which we've got to remember was, remains, thankfully until now, a pluralistic place where Christian and Arab would live side by side in relative peace during the Syrian civil war, where women often overlooked and not empowered in other parts of the region found themselves empowered in Kurdistan. All of that is on the line now after the decision by the United States to pull out its troops. Devin?
Such high stakes. James Longman reporting live for us from Iraq. James, thank you so much. Stay safe over there as you continue your travels. Back here in Washington now, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg recovering today after quite a grilling on Capitol Hill yesterday for many hours, pressed on the company's privacy policy, political ads, and a lot more. One exchange in particular is getting attention, this one with New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Take a look.
Could I run ads targeting Republicans in primaries saying that they voted for the Green New Deal? I mean, if you're not fact-checking political advertisements, I'm just trying to understand the bounds here.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
Do you see a potential problem here with a complete lack of fact-checking on political advertisements?
I think if you were to run an ad that had a lie, that would be bad.
Could I pay to target predominantly black zip codes and advertise them the incorrect election date?
No, Congresswoman, you couldn't. We have, even for these policies around the newsworthiness of content that politicians say and the general principle that I believe that...
But you said you're not going to fact check my ads.
We have, if anyone, including a politician, is saying things that can cause, that is calling for violence or could risk imminent physical harm or voter or census suppression when we roll out the census suppression policy, we will take that content down.
And our Deputy Political Director, Mary Alice Parks, joins us now live here in Washington. You covered the hearing, Mary Alice. We've talked about this for a couple of days, but Facebook is really in a bind here. On the one hand, they're trying to tell Congress that they are policing misinformation being pushed on their platform, but then you hear from Democrats complaining about these very false and misleading political ads that Facebook is standing by.
Look, Democrats say that Facebook has a real credibility issue here when it comes to those political ads, which are already flooding the platform ahead of the 2020 cycle. Facebook has said that it's not going to engage in any fact-checking. Instead, they're going to work with some independent outside fact-checkers to maybe flag misinformation, but not take political content down. But you see, that answer is just not enough for a lot of Democrats. Instead, they are pushing the company, really accusing Facebook of fostering an environment of misinformation and even hate speech. You know, again, Zuckerberg says it's not about the money, that he doesn't want to be in the business of censoring political speech. We can see how that could be a slippery slope, too. But this is a tough battle right now because Democrats want real answers, and they want to know what exactly the bounds are.
Yeah, and they're staring down the potential for some real stiff regulations, which they don't want if some of these Democratic presidential candidates take office. The real purpose of the hearing, Mary Alice, was about this new cryptocurrency that Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook want to launch. It's called Libra. It would help people pay for things all across the platform. Give us the level of support in Congress for approving such a currency. Is it dead on arrival?
Maybe. Look, members of Congress might not get the final say on this one, but I was surprised by how many members used their time at the hearing to announce that they were planning to support or introduce legislation to try to stop this from happening at all. We saw both Republicans and Democrats come together and agree that they are really not fans of this idea. They are very worried that more traditional financial institutions are not working with Facebook on this one, and they think it has the possibility to really upset global markets.
All right, a big story that will continue to reverberate into the campaign. Mary Alice Parks, our Deputy Political Director. Thank you, Mary Alice. To New York now, and the federal drug trafficking conviction of the brother of the president of Honduras. A federal jury last week convicted Tony Hernandez of importing nearly 200,000 kilos of cocaine to the United States. He was caught after bribing law enforcement officials to protect his shipments into this country. This case is putting a spotlight on Honduras, one of the poorest and most violent countries countries in Central America. That, of course, has been the point of origin for a lot of those migrants that have been showing up at the southern border. Also raising some questions now about that country's president, who is supportive of President Trump and his immigration crackdown here in the United States. So what are the implications for the United States, for foreign aid to Honduras, and what does this mean for Honduras itself? Let's bring in Jeff Ernst. He's a freelance reporter, has been here on the debrief before, has covered the trial. Jeff, good to see you. You were in the courtroom for this thing in the Southern District of New York from the beginning. Recap the case for us, and why is this conviction so significant?
Well, right from the beginning, in their opening statement, the prosecutors announced that the brother of the president of Honduras received a $1 million bribe from El Chapo in 2013 that was intended for the president's first presidential campaign. Right from the get-go, there were major fireworks. Throughout the week, we heard several DEA agents as well as confessed narco traffickers from Central America who are now cooperating with U.S. authorities. And they relayed how Tony Hernandez had begun by providing them with sensitive information about police checkpoints and other information that would be useful to them to avoid seizures of their cocaine. And then eventually worked his way up the chain to the point where he became a supplier of cocaine with access to a lab in Colombia where he stamped kilos of cocaine with his own initials, PH, in the style of a Tommy Hilfiger logo. So overall, we saw a picture of how Tony Hernandez, as his brother's political career rise and gained more power, he became more entrenched in the drug trafficking trade.
And this is, again, the brother of the president of Honduras convicted in a United States federal court for this trafficking charge, Jeff. And the connection to the president, his brother, is significant here because the president of Honduras will now oversee millions of dollars of United States foreign aid that President Trump just approved, right?
That's correct. The president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, was heavily implicated in the case. He's an unindicted co-conspirator. He was accused by multiple drug traffickers of having received millions of dollars in bribes. And when you look at the case as a whole, his brother Tony's entire drug trafficking career relied upon the connections and power afforded by his brother Juan Orlando. So this idea that President Hernandez didn't know what was going on, it's very hard to believe at this point. And also it appears that he has been applying selective justice. And this was a key point made by prosecutors that none of the cooperating witnesses in the trial against Tony Hernandez were ever prosecuted or investigated in Honduras. Nor were they extradited by Honduras. So while President Hernandez has cast himself as a strong ally in the war on drugs, it appears that he's been selectively choosing who to apply that justice to and avoiding that justice being applied to his own allies.
Yeah, very close there with his brother, obviously just convicted in United States federal court. And this is a story that we will keep our eyes on. We will see where this trail of alleged corruption in Honduras takes us. Jeff Ernst, a freelance reporter who's been covering this story. Thanks so much for joining us, Jeff. Finally, today to some good news in the sports world here for Washington Nationals fans. Night 2 of the World Series in Houston. What an upset, what a blowout for the Washington Nationals. 12-3, now taking a 2-0 lead in the series. Jessica Mendoza joins us now from ESPN. Jessica, as a Washington Nationals fan, that was a very satisfying night. What was your big takeaway from the game last night?
Yeah, I think the fact that everyone is so shocked. I mean, coming into this, it was all about Houston, all about Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander, and how they are going to shut down the Nationals. I think what a lot of people don't realize is since May 23rd, remember how the Nationals had that bad start? Well, since May 23rd, they have been the best offensive team. They've had the best record, the best run differential. This is the best offense in baseball for 5 months, but they don't get a lot of credit, partially because they struggled early on, but they've been so good, and a lot of the attention goes to their pitchers. This is a team that has exploded. I mean, 9 runs alone against 2 of the best pitchers in all of baseball, in Garrett Cole and Justin Verlander. So this is an exciting team to watch. I covered them in the NLDS, the NLCS, and now to see them in the World Series shine on the biggest stage, it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, what a 7th inning. Gosh, 6 runs there for the Nationals. Steven Strasburg on fire last night. They're actually coming to Washington tomorrow night for Game 3 in the series, 8 o'clock Eastern time. What are you going to be looking for in Game 3?
I think it's going to be, the Astros have to get back in this. I mean, for it to be a competitive World Series, it comes on Zach Greinke, which is the Astros went and got him at the trade deadline to be this guy. And yes, I talked about Cole and Verlander, but for Game 3, he needs to be the ace. It's like wipe the slate clean. And this is a guy that's going to be a future Hall of Famer. He needs to pitch like one to get them back in it. And I think for the Astros to also get the lead there in D.C., think about this. This is the first time a World Series game is played in Washington, D.C. since 1933. It's gonna be rocking.
It's going to be raucous. The city is excited. The weather is going to be great. Tomorrow night, it will be something to watch. Jessica Mendoza with ESPN. Thanks so much, Jessica. Great to see you. Hope to have you back as the series continues. And I just want to leave our viewers today with this fun moment from the game last night. Simone Biles, the gymnastics superstar. Look at that before she threw out the first pitch, doing a tumble jump or whatever you call that. She was on fire last night. Of course, a big Houston Astros fan, and we salute her. And thanks to all of you for watching the debrief today here on ABC News Live. I'll be back at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time with our political headline show, The Briefing Room. A lot to get into today, of course. David Muir is here at 8 p.m. Eastern for World News Tonight Prime, wrapping up the latest headlines of the day. And, of course, download the ABC News app on your phone or mobile tablet. You can get all the headlines 24/7, including our live free streaming coverage there, big live button at the bottom of the app. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.